Hundreds of doctors failed to heal the billionaire CEO until a cleaner changed his destiny overnight. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to tonight's story. Hundreds of doctors failed to heal the billionaire CEO until a cleaner changed his destiny overnight. The night shift at Westbridge Private Hospital was quiet, almost unnaturally so. The hum of fluorescent lights echoed through the empty corridor, and the faint beeping of a heart monitor broke the silence like a stubborn heartbeat refusing to fade. In room 903, behind a glass door marked restricted access, lay Grant Carter, a 32-year-old billionaire CEO who had once ruled the skyline of New York City. Now he was motionless, pale, and silent, his body kept alive only by tubes and machines. Doctors had called it a medical dead end. Hundreds of specialists had come and gone, each leaving behind thicker files and thinner hope. They said his brainwaves were too weak, his body too far gone. They said it was only a matter of time before the machines would stop doing what his body no longer could. But that night, when every doctor had given up, a woman quietly pushed her cleaning cart through the sterile hallway. Her name was Lena Brooks. She was not a nurse. She had no medical degree, just a worn badge that read, Night Maintenance, Westbridge Hospital. She paused at the door of room 903, reading the nameplate with tired eyes. Grant Carter? She whispered softly, as if speaking it might disturb his sleep. She had read about him once in the news, the man who built an empire before turning 30. Now, that same man was lying here, trapped between life and death. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and despair. She adjusted her gloves and began to wipe down the counters, humming under her breath. Her voice was quiet, a lullaby more for herself than anyone else. Her shift was long, 12 hours straight, and her body ached. But this room, his room, felt different. Every time she cleaned it, she felt a strange pull, as if the silence itself was listening. Another night, huh? She murmured, glancing at the still figure on the bed. You probably have no idea who I am. That's fine. Nobody does. She wrung out her cloth, moving slowly, carefully, almost reverently. Her reflection shimmered in the glass above his head, faint and tired. She sighed. My son asked me today if you woke up yet. He thinks I work for some superhero. Maybe he's right. The heart monitor beeped softly, steady but faint. She chuckled at her own words, shaking her head. What am I doing? Talking to a man who cannot hear me. But she kept talking, because in a hospital filled with machines, her voice was the only human sound left. When she leaned closer to adjust the blanket, something caught her eye, a silver pen lying on the bedside table. It was engraved with the initials G.C. She picked it up gently, wiping away a layer of dust. Expensive, she whispered. You must have signed a lot of dreams with this. It's $7 over. She placed it back exactly where it had been and turned off the bedside lamp. Outside, the rain tapped softly against the window. She checked the clock. 2:13 a.m. Another 3 hours before sunrise. She stretched her sore back and gave the room one last look before she left. For a moment, her gaze lingered on Grant's face, so peaceful, so far away. Something in her chest tightened. Good night, Mr. Carter, she whispered. If you can hear me, just hold on a little longer. She closed the door behind her. Inside, the monitor flickered. The steady line of his pulse jumped once, then again. So faint, it could have been the electricity. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the sound of a cleaner's voice reaching a place medicine could not. That night, the cameras in room 903 recorded something no one would notice until days later. The faint movement of a hand, fingers twitching against the white sheet, as if trying to reach back to the world he was not ready to leave. The following morning, sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Westbridge Hospital, thin and cold. Lena returned for her next shift, the same blue uniform, the same tired eyes. But something inside her felt different. Maybe it was the way she had spoken to him last night. Maybe it was that tiny flicker of hope she could not explain. She wheeled her cart toward room 903, expecting the same silence. But when she opened the door, she stopped. The air felt charged, almost alive. The monitor was steady, a stronger rhythm than before. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said softly, trying to smile. She straightened his sheets and began her routine dusting, wiping, checking the corners. But her eyes kept drifting toward the bed. His hand looked different today. Not stiff, not lifeless. Almost relaxed. She leaned closer, speaking again, half afraid of her own hope. "You know, my son Ethan had a good day. He drew you in his sketchbook. You are wearing a cape and saving people." Her laugh was quiet and nervous. "He thinks everyone who sleeps this long must be gathering strength for something big." The machine beeped once, louder than before. Lena froze. Okay. That was weird. She glanced toward the hall, but no one else was around. Her heart beat faster. She reached for his wrist gently. The skin was warm. Maybe a little too warm. "Mr. Carter?" she whispered. No response. The beeping steadied again. She exhaled, trying to convince herself it was nothing. "You really scared me for a second." At that moment, the door opened behind her. "Why are you in here again, Brooks?" It was Dr. Harris, the head of neurology, tall and sharp-eyed, clipboard in hand. Lena straightened. "Just cleaning, sir." He frowned. "You are spending too much time in this room. This is not part of your job description." "I know. It is just, he seems different today." "Different?" He scanned the monitor, unimpressed. "His condition is unchanged. Do not waste your energy imagining miracles." Then, lowering his voice, "Do your work quietly and leave the patient care to professionals." Lena nodded, cheeks burning. She waited until he left before she whispered, "They have stopped believing in you, but I have not." That evening, after a long day of scrubbing floors and emptying bins, she returned to room 903 once more. It was almost midnight now. The hospital was asleep. She set down her mop, pulled up a chair beside the bed, and spoke softly. "Do you know what keeps me going?" she said, resting her chin on her hand. "My son. He is 8. He believes I am brave, but sometimes I am just tired. I clean rooms where people do not wake up. I hear machines where laughter should be." She paused, eyes glistening in the dim light. "So if you can hear me, Mr. Carter, please wake up. Not for me, but because maybe someone still needs you out there." The clock ticked on. Minutes felt like hours. Then it happened again. His fingers twitched. Just slightly. Her breath caught. Oh my God. This time, she was sure she had seen it. She ran to the hallway shouting, "Doctor! Someone, please." Dr. Harris and 2 nurses rushed in, glancing at the monitor. "What happened?" "I saw him move. His hand moved." Lena's voice trembled. The doctor checked the chart, his tone cold. "There is no change in his vitals. It might be muscle reflex." "But I saw it," she insisted. He turned to her, expression sharp. "You are a cleaner, not a nurse. Please step out." The words cut deeper than he knew. She backed away, nodding slowly, eyes filling with tears. Outside the glass, she watched as they scribbled notes, their voices clinical, detached, but she was sure of what she had seen. Later, in the empty break room, she sat alone with a paper cup of coffee gone cold. Her hands were still shaking. "Maybe I am losing it," she whispered. But then she remembered the way his fingers had curled. Deliberate, faint but real. Lena looked toward the window, where dawn was just beginning to turn the sky gray-blue. Her reflection stared back tired, hopeful, stubborn. "No," she said softly. "I know what I saw. Is C2, well, dis heaven taxon." And back in room 903, under the hum of machines and the glow of the rising sun, the billionaire's heart monitor began to pick up a stronger rhythm, steady, clear, alive. Somewhere in the depths of his unconsciousness, Grant Carter was beginning to hear the voice that refused to give up on him. The next night, the hospital lights flickered against the storm outside. Rain tapped steadily on the tall windows of the intensive care wing. Lena was back on her shift, pushing her cart through the silent hallway. Every sound echoed the wheels on tile, the faint hum of electricity, the steady rhythm of Grant Carter's heart monitor coming from room 903. She stopped at his door and peeked through the glass. He looked exactly the same, but she could not shake the memory of his fingers moving. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. "Good evening, Mr. Carter," she said quietly, setting down her supplies. "It is just us again." She checked the corner table, adjusting the vase of lilies that someone from his company had sent weeks ago. The petals had begun to wilt. She replaced the water carefully, her movements calm and deliberate, as if afraid to break the silence that hung over the room. You know, she continued, they said it was impossible, that what I saw was only a muscle reflex. But I know better. I know when something is alive. Her words were soft, almost like a prayer. She began wiping the counter, then the metal railing beside his bed. Her routine had become a quiet ritual, simple, repetitive, human. She glanced at the heart monitor. The pulse was steady now, a rhythm she had learned to recognize like a song. The rain outside grew heavier, and thunder rolled faintly in the distance. Lena reached for a fresh cloth, but her hand brushed his by accident. Warm. Too warm. She froze. Then, the faintest pressure, a movement, deliberate this time. His fingers curled around hers. Her heart jumped. She gasped, eyes widening, afraid to breathe. Mr. Carter? She whispered. If you can hear me. Squeeze again. Nothing. Silence. Then slowly, his fingers moved once more, weak but certain. Oh my God, she whispered, her voice breaking. You are really there. She leaned closer, tears forming in her eyes. I told them you could hear me. The monitor beeped faster now. The line rose and fell, matching the quick rhythm of her heartbeat. She pressed the call button. Doctor, I need help. He is moving. Moments later, nurses burst into the room. Dr. Harris followed, his tone sharp. What is happening here? He moved, Lena said, pointing at Grant's hand. He held my hand. I felt it. Dr. Harris examined the chart, his skepticism turning into unease as he looked at the readings. Increase in neural activity, he murmured. How long has this been happening? Since last night, Lena said softly. For the first time, the doctor did not have an answer. Keep monitoring, he ordered. But his voice had lost its edge. Do not leave his side. When the room cleared again, Lena sat beside the bed, holding her breath, afraid the moment would vanish if she blinked. She looked at his face, the strong jawline, the faint shadow of a scar near his temple, the rise and fall of his chest. You heard me, did you not? She said quietly. You are fighting your way back. She placed her free hand gently on his chest, feeling the slow, steady rhythm beneath her palm. You are not alone anymore, Mr. Carter. If you can grasped. Outside, the storm raged, but inside room 903, a single miracle had begun to unfold, silent, fragile, unstoppable. 2 days later, Westbridge Hospital was no longer silent. Word had spread through the corridors like electricity. The billionaire patient in room 903 had moved. For the first time in almost a year, there was hope. Lena arrived early for her shift, clutching a cup of coffee she could barely afford. Her hands trembled as she scanned her ID badge at the elevator. She tried to calm her nerves, but her heart was already racing. When the doors opened to the top floor, a group of doctors and nurses were gathered around the monitors outside Grant Carter's room. Dr. Harris turned when he saw her. Brooks, you are here. Yes, sir, she said, unsure if she should apologize or smile. He gave her a measured look. Whatever you did, keep doing it. His brain activity has spiked beyond anything we have seen in months. It is extraordinary. Lena blinked, stunned. So you believe me now? He did not answer, but the faint curve of his mouth was all the confirmation she needed. She stepped quietly into the room. The light was softer today, warm from the morning sun pouring through the blinds. The heart monitor hummed with life. She could feel it, the atmosphere had changed. Good morning, Mr. Carter, she whispered, placing the cup on the counter. You have everyone talking about you. She sat beside him again, as she always did. The smell of antiseptic mixed with the faint sweetness of her lavender hand cream. She folded her hands on her lap and smiled faintly. You know, I told my son you moved your hand. He said, see, Mom? He heard you. She chuckled softly. Maybe he is right. Maybe you can hear everything I say. End quote. The rest time to end her cess. The heart monitor beeped a little faster, and Lena's breath caught. Grant, can you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The monitor spiked once more. Her eyes widened. That was not a coincidence, was it? Tears welled in her eyes. She reached for his hand again, her thumb brushing the back of it gently. It is okay. You are safe. Just take your time. Behind her, a nurse entered quietly, holding a clipboard. We will be running another scan this afternoon. His readings are incredible. Lena smiled weakly. He is fighting to come back. The nurse nodded, almost in awe. Maybe because someone finally talked to him. After the nurse left, Lena sat back and looked at him again. She studied his face, the faint stubble on his jaw, the shadows under his eyes, the strength still hidden beneath the tubes and wires. "I wonder what kind of man you were before this," she murmured. "Everyone says you were ruthless, impossible to please. But I do not believe that. Someone who built so much must have cared once." Her voice trembled. "I lost my husband 3 years ago. Heart failure. I used to sit beside him like this, praying for one more heartbeat, one more breath. Maybe that is why I cannot stop coming back here." A tear slipped down her cheek, but she wiped it quickly. "You are not just another patient to me, Grant. You are my reminder that hope is still worth something." As the sun rose higher, the monitors continued their steady song. For the first time, faint movement rippled through his face, a twitch near his eyelids, almost like a dream trying to surface. Lena leaned forward, whispering through her tears, "If you can hear me, come back. The world is waiting for you." In Mad About. And somewhere deep inside the man who had once ruled an empire, a faint spark of awareness flickered, fragile but growing. Grant Carter was waking up. The next morning began like any other at Westbridge Hospital, but something in the air felt different. The sky outside was bright and clear after days of rain, sunlight spilling across the floor tiles like a quiet blessing. Lena's footsteps echoed down the hall as she made her way toward room 903, her pulse quickening with every step. When she entered, the hum of machines greeted her as always, but the sound was steadier now, stronger. Grant Carter's color had returned faintly, his skin no longer gray but warm. His breathing was deeper. His fingers rested on the blanket as if waiting. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said softly. "You kept your promise, did you not? You are coming back to us." "Axes have dem." She set her cleaning cart aside and drew the blinds open. Light filled the room, washing over the billionaire who had once ruled boardrooms and skyscrapers but now lay still, somewhere between life and awakening. Lena began her usual routine, straightening his sheets, refilling the water cup, wiping the surfaces with gentle care. Every motion carried a quiet reverence. Then, without warning, a sound broke through the steady rhythm of the machines. A soft gasp. Barely audible, but real. Lena froze. Her eyes darted toward the bed. Grant's fingers twitched again once, twice, and then his head moved slightly. She dropped the cloth in her hand, her heart leaping into her throat. "Grant?" she whispered. "Can you hear me?" His lips parted. A faint, broken sound escaped. She leaned closer, tears already welling in her eyes. "Grant, it is all right. You are safe. You are in the hospital. You have been asleep for a long time." His eyelids fluttered. A low, rasping breath came next, then another. His hand trembled against the blanket. She gripped it gently. "That is it. Follow my voice. You are doing it." The heart monitor spiked, the lines climbing higher, steadier. Outside, a nurse passing by noticed the sudden change and shouted for Dr. Harris. Within seconds, the room filled with footsteps and gasps. "He is breathing on his own," one nurse said in disbelief. Dr. Harris stood by the bed, watching as Grant's eyes began to open. For a moment, he seemed almost afraid to believe it. "Mr. Carter," he said carefully, "can you hear me?" Grant's eyelids lifted halfway. His gaze was unfocused at first, scanning the room as though surfacing from a deep ocean. Then his eyes landed on Lena. The smallest flicker of recognition crossed his face. She smiled through tears. "Welcome back, Mr. Carter." His lips moved again, hoarse and cracked. The words came out in fragments, but she understood them. "Who are you?" Lena's breath caught. "My name is Lena. I clean this floor. I have been here every night." He stared at her for a long moment, confusion and gratitude mixing in his weak expression. "Your voice," he whispered. "I remember your voice." Dr. Harris turned to Lena, stunned. "He remembers you?" Lena nodded, still holding Grant's trembling hand. "He heard me. I told you he could." The doctor exhaled, almost smiling for the first time in months. "It seems we all owe you a thank you, Miss Brooks." But Lena barely heard him. She could only look at the man who had finally returned to the world. "You fought your way back," she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I knew you would." Grant blinked slowly, his voice little more than a breath. "Thank you." As the team worked around them, adjusting monitors and preparing for tests, Lena stepped back, her heart full. The man who had been lost to science had answered her voice. The impossible had happened. That night, as she left the hospital, the city lights shimmered against the glass towers outside. For the first time in years, Lena felt that something greater than medicine had guided her hands, something human, something kind, something that believed. Grant Carter's recovery was slow, but steady. Within a week, the ventilator was removed, and he could breathe on his own. His voice was weak, but his eyes were awake, alive in a way they had not been in months. Every day, he was visited by doctors, therapists, and executives from his company. Yet, the only person he asked for was the cleaner who had spoken to him through the darkness. "Where is Lena?" he would ask each morning, his voice still rough from disuse. When Lena entered the room that day, carrying a small vase of fresh daisies, he smiled faintly. The effort seemed to take all his strength. "You brought the flowers again," he whispered. "They are from the hospital garden," she said gently. "They brighten this room." He studied her face as if searching for something familiar. "You were here all that time?" "Every night," she said. "Someone had to make sure you were not alone." He let out a slow breath. "I heard you," he said quietly. "I thought it was a dream at first. Your voice kept telling me to hold on." Her eyes softened. "Then I am glad I did not stop talking." In the weeks that followed, Lena continued to visit after her cleaning rounds. She would help adjust his pillow, read him short stories from old magazines, or tell him about her son's drawings. Sometimes she brought Ethan's sketches, superheroes, nurses, people helping each other. Grant always smiled at those. During one session of physical therapy, Grant tried to lift his hand to sign his name again, but his muscles trembled. Lena placed her hand gently over his to steady him. "You are doing fine," she said. "Slow is still progress." He looked at her with quiet admiration. "You talk like someone who has carried too much weight alone." She smiled sadly. "Maybe. But when you keep moving, even slow steps count." As days turned into weeks, Grant's strength returned. He began to sit upright, then stand with assistance, and eventually take short walks down the corridor. The first time he stood at the window again, sunlight spilled over his face. He stared at the skyline beyond the hospital, the city he had built a life around but could barely remember. "I thought I lost everything," he said softly. "You did not lose everything," Lena replied. "You just needed to start over." He turned toward her, his expression thoughtful. "Most people came here for my name, my money, or my headlines. You came to clean a room, and somehow you saved me." "I did not save you, Grant," she said. "You chose to come back. I just reminded you there was something worth coming back to." For a moment, silence filled the room, peaceful and heavy with gratitude. Then he smiled. "You talk like someone who should not be scrubbing floors." She laughed quietly. "Maybe, but someone has to keep this place alive." From that day, he refused to let her call him Mr. Carter anymore. "Just Grant," he said. "After all, you already talked me back to life." Their bond deepened with each passing day, not through grand gestures, but through small human moments. The way she straightened his blanket before leaving, or how he saved her a seat near the window during therapy sessions. By the time Grant was discharged to continue his recovery at home, the entire hospital staff gathered to see him off. As he was wheeled toward the exit, he reached out his hand to Lena. "Do not disappear," he said quietly. "I am not done thanking you." She smiled, holding his hand one last time before letting go. "You do not need to thank me," she whispered. "Just live well." Outside, the spring air was warm, the world bright and new. Grant Carter, once the man every doctor had given up on, was alive, breathing, and ready to begin again. And somewhere behind him, a cleaner named Lena walked back to her night shift, her heart full, knowing that kindness had done what medicine could not. Grant Carter's homecoming made national headlines. The billionaire who had defied every medical prediction was finally discharged from Westbridge Hospital. Cameras flashed as his car pulled through the tall iron gates of his estate, but behind the smile he gave the press, there was a quiet heaviness. The mansion that had once felt like power now felt empty. The walls echoed with silence, the air too clean, too cold. Every polished surface reminded him of the months he had lost, of the people who had stopped believing. Everyone except one. That evening, he sat by the window, gazing at the city lights below the hill. His assistant entered quietly, carrying a stack of documents. "Welcome back, Mr. Carter. The board is requesting a meeting next week." Grant nodded absent-mindedly. "Sure. Tell them I will be ready." And 7. And 10. With no more. But even as he said the words, his thoughts drifted somewhere else, back to a hospital room, to a woman with tired eyes and a gentle voice. A week later, Grant kept his promise. He called Westbridge Hospital, asking for Lena Brooks. The nurse on the line told him she was still working the night shift, same as before. Without hesitation, Grant arranged a visit. When Lena saw him walking through the hospital lobby without a wheelchair or assistance, her breath caught. He looked stronger now, dressed simply in a navy sweater, his steps steady. "You are supposed to be resting," she said, half laughing, half scolding. "I am," he replied with a grin. "Just not from you." He handed her a small box. Inside was a silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny engraving of the initials G.C. "You left this in my room," he said softly. "The pen, it was yours for a while. I thought maybe you should have something that stays." Lena blinked, surprised. "I did not leave that pen on purpose," he smiled. "Then maybe fate borrowed it for a bit." For a while they sat in the hospital garden, talking like old friends. Grant told her about his therapy, about the strange emptiness of returning to a life that no longer felt like his. Lena listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap. "Maybe it is not emptiness," she said. "Maybe it is space for something new." He looked at her then, really looked. "You always know what to say." The next few weeks passed quickly. Grant began visiting more often, bringing lunch for her during her break, sometimes just walking the quiet corridors beside her. Nurses whispered and smiled behind their masks. One night, as they stood outside the ICU wing, Grant's expression changed. "There is something I never told you," he said. "The car crash, it was not an accident. My brakes were tampered with." Lena's eyes widened. "You mean someone tried to?" He nodded slowly. "Kill me, but I do not know who yet. My company has enemies, even inside my own family." Her voice trembled. "That is awful, Grant." He reached into his coat pocket, handing her a small envelope. Inside were old photographs, his car after the crash, the broken guardrail, and a maintenance report with a signature at the bottom. "I found this last night," he said quietly. "Something about it feels wrong, and I think you are the only person I can trust to help me figure it out." Lena stared at the papers, her pulse quickening. "Me? Why me?" "Because you see what others overlook," he said. "You saw life in me when every doctor saw nothing. I need that same instinct now." Her voice softened. "If you really trust me, then I will help you." And second time, Grant smiled faintly. "I do." As she held the papers in her hands, the wind brushed through the garden, carrying the faint scent of rain. For the first time since his awakening, Grant Carter felt a strange sense of clarity. The miracle that had saved him was no longer a mystery, it was standing right beside him, ready to uncover the truth. The following days turned into a quiet investigation between Grant and Lena. Each evening after her shift, they would meet in the hospital garden or in the small cafe across the street. She brought her careful eyes and her instinct for detail. He brought access to the company's private records that no one else dared to question. One night, as rain fell lightly outside the cafe window, Lena laid out the documents on the table. "This maintenance report," she said, pointing to the bottom of the page, "was signed 2 days before your crash. But this signature looks traced. The real technician's name is Peter Lang, and according to hospital records, he was admitted for a broken arm that same week. He could not have signed anything." Grant leaned closer, his jaw tightening. "So someone forged it." Lena nodded. "Someone who wanted that car to fail." Grant rubbed his temple. "My stepbrother Nathan was acting CEO while I was in recovery. He had access to everything, vehicles, staff, contracts. If anyone had a reason to remove me, it was him." Lena hesitated. "That is a serious accusation." "I know," Grant said quietly, "but it feels right. Nathan always wanted control. The moment I went into that coma, he became the head of the company." Lena glanced at him, her voice firm. "Then we need proof, not feelings." He was apt. The next morning, while the hospital buzzed with routine life, Grant returned to his corporate headquarters for the first time since the accident. Employees lined the marble lobby, stunned to see him alive and walking. Cameras flashed again, and he gave the same polite smile. But his eyes were cold with purpose. Nathan greeted him at the elevator, too quickly, too smoothly. "Grant, my brother, this is unbelievable. You look well, better than we dared hope." Grant's smile did not reach his eyes. "I appreciate your concern, Nathan. We should talk soon, privately." Later that night, Lena waited outside the hospital, her phone buzzing. It was Grant. "I found something," he said. Bank transfers to a shell account under the same name as the mechanic who handled my car inspection. The payment stopped the day after the crash. Her heart pounded. You have to take this to the authorities. In factor broke as a deal dance found the CU. I will, he said. But first I want to see his face when he knows I am still here. The next morning, Grant called a board meeting. Nathan arrived confident, unaware of the trap that had already been set. Lena watched from the back of the conference room, quietly holding the flash drive Grant had given her. As the meeting began, Grant stood tall, his voice calm but sharp. Before we discuss future leadership, there is something I must reveal. He gestured toward the screen. The projector flickered to life, displaying transaction logs, forged signatures, and surveillance stills from the company's garage. Gasps filled the room. Nathan's face went pale. This is absurd, he sputtered. Grant looked at him steadily. Is it? Because your signature appears on every authorization form. Before Nathan could speak again, two police officers entered, summoned by Grant earlier that morning. One of them handed over a warrant. The board members sat in stunned silence as Nathan was led out of the room, shouting his innocence. Grant exhaled slowly, the weight of months lifting from his chest. When the meeting ended, he found Lena waiting in the hallway, the faintest smile on her lips. It is over, she said. Yes, he replied softly. And it is because of you. She shook her head. You just needed someone to believe the truth. For the first time since waking, Grant felt at peace not because he had reclaimed his company, but because he had finally found the one person who never treated him like a title, but as a man worth saving. As they stepped out into the sunlight together, the storm that had followed him for months finally broke, leaving behind only clear skies and the quiet promise of something new. Months passed, and peace finally settled over Grant Carter's life. The investigation was closed, and Nathan was sentenced for attempted murder and corporate fraud. The headlines shifted from scandal to miracle, the billionaire who woke from a coma and rebuilt his life. But for Grant, the true miracle had nothing to do with business or recovery. It was Lena. After the trial, Grant created a new foundation dedicated to medical ethics and patient care. He named it the Lena Project, in honor of the woman whose kindness had brought him back to life. The foundation funded research for coma rehabilitation and provided scholarships for hospital staff who worked behind the scenes, the cleaners, technicians, and nurses who were often unseen but essential. On the day of the foundation's opening, sunlight streamed through the glass atrium of the Westbridge Center. Dozens of guests gathered, cameras flashing as Grant took the stage. But when he looked at the crowd, his eyes searched for one face. Near the back, dressed in a simple navy dress, Lena stood quietly, her hands clasped together. When he saw her, his voice softened. Months ago, I was a man trapped between life and death, he began. Doctors fought for me, machines kept me alive. But in the end, it was a voice, a simple, human voice, that reached me. That voice belonged to a woman who never stopped believing I could hear her. The audience turned as he gestured toward Lena. She froze, embarrassed, but Grant continued. She did not see a billionaire or a headline. She saw a man worth saving. And today, everything we build through this foundation will carry her name, because compassion is the truest form of healing. When the applause faded, Grant stepped off the stage and walked toward her. I told you I would not stop thanking you, he said softly. You already did, she whispered. You lived. He shook his head gently. That was only the beginning. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a silver pen engraved with his initials, the same one she had once polished and placed on his bedside table. Do you remember this? Lena smiled. Of course. You kept it. I did. But I think it belongs to you now, he said, pressing it into her hand. You wrote my second chance with your kindness. For a moment they stood there in the golden light, surrounded by applause that felt distant and soft. Then Grant took her hand, his voice warm and steady. Lena Brooks, I have had everything money could buy, but none of it mattered until you showed me what truly heals a man. Will you stay by my side, not as my nurse, not as my savior, but as my partner in this life? Her eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. Yes, Grant, always. The crowd erupted into cheers as he wrapped his arms around her. The flash of cameras captured the moment the billionaire who had once been declared hopeless, now alive and whole, standing beside the woman who had changed his destiny. That night, as the lights dimmed and guests departed, Grant and Lena walked through the empty hall together. Outside, the city glowed beneath a silver moon. He looked at her and whispered, "When everyone gave up on me, you cleaned the dust and found my heart." She laughed softly. "You make it sound like I just did my job." He smiled. "You did more than that. You saved my soul." And as they stepped into the night, hand in hand, the world seemed quiet again. No machines, no headlines, just two people who had found love and redemption in the most unexpected place. In the end, the story of Grant Carter and Lena Brooks was not about wealth or miracles. It was about the power of kindness, the courage to believe, and the simple truth that sometimes healing begins with a whisper in the dark.